Shalom. First and foremost, call halal yamla, Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem Harachakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and the elders of Great Millstone, from whom I learned the truth from, and also peace and salutations to the hopeful elect of the nation of Israel, scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And in this video, I'm going to be going into another article. Okay, and this is from the Newsbreak app, and the source of this article is from, as you see on the screen, 24/7 food recipes. All right, and the title of the article, as you see at the top, it says parts of America now facing fresh food shortages for the first time. All right, and then as you see underneath it, rising food insecurity hits record numbers across the country. Because basically, over these past few years, especially from 2020 up until now, all right, one of the main things that's been pretty much attacked, for lack of better words, especially here in America, is food, the food supply. Okay, people, basically people's ability to buy food in abundance as they were used to before 2020. Okay, well now, slowly but surely, each year from 2020 up until now, that's now becoming a thing of the past. People being able to buy and access food and resources as they were comfortably used to in times past. All right, because now, as this article is going into, we're starting to see, signs of major food shortages. All right, in the produce, the meat. We definitely been seeing eggs under attack, from at the beginning of the year. Okay, that's why, a lot of people, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people, including our people, voted for Trump in the first place. Okay, to pretty much, lessen the inflation and lessen the price of eggs and food and rent and all these things. And yet here we are in July 2025. Okay, 6 or 7 months after his inauguration. Yeah, we still see the price of eggs is still high, the price of rent is still high, food is still high. Okay, America hasn't been made great again yet, you see. And now, as we're going into this article, now this country, America, Babylon the Great, is starting to, finally fully see the signs of food shortages and famine. Okay, as a matter of fact, let me get this real quick. This is Ezekiel chapter 14 and verse 12. As you see at the subheading, the city will not be spared. All right, Ezekiel chapter 14 verse 12. The word of the Lord Yahweh came again to me, saying, Son of man, when the land sinneth against me by trespassing grievously, then will I stretch out mine hand upon it, and will break the staff of bread thereof, and will send famine upon it, and will cut off man and beast from it. All right, and let's read this verse in the NLT. Ezekiel 14 verse 13 in the NLT. It says, Son of man, suppose the country of a people were to sin against me, and I lifted my fist to crush them, cutting off their food supply, and sending a famine to destroy both people and animals. You see, and that's what the Lord is doing to Babylon the Great America. Because of what? America's sins have reached unto heaven, as it speaks of about Babylon the Great in the book of Revelation, the 18th chapter, which is America. Okay, and as well, America is that sinful kingdom that our forefather Amos prophesied in the book of Amos, the 9th chapter and the 8th verse. Okay, ultimately going into America, that sinful kingdom that the Lord has his eyes upon, that is getting ready to destroy off of the face of the earth. Okay, but before that, all right, the Lord is going to bring various judgments upon America to further lead to its collapse. All right, and as we see, one of the judgments that the Lord is getting ready to bring upon America, Babylon the Great, is cutting off the food supply. all right, and sending famine, okay, to destroy, many people here in Babylon the Great, America, including 2/3 of our people, and as well even destroy the animals. You see, that's also a strategic move by the Lord to also further the famine. You see, because animals, all right, animals produce what? Meat. You see, killing and slaughtering animals across America produces meat. You see, and that's one of the major things, all right, the major luxuries here in Babylon, the Great America, an abundance of meat. Okay, you go to a grocery store, you see the meat section full of different meats. All right, both clean meats as well as unclean meats, especially that swine, which is big here in America and ultimately big all throughout the West as a whole. America, Europe, all right. Esau historically was always big on that swine, pork, all right. That's why here in America, you see people lust after, bacon, sausage, okay, pepperoni pizza, all right, all these different dishes that have, swine and pork in it, okay. So for the Lord to, send famine upon Babylon the Great, to not only destroy, kill off a lot of people in this country by way of famine, but also as well, kill off a lot of animals due to the famine. Killing off the animals would further bring forth more famine. As what? It would bring forth meat shortages. Shortage of beef, a shortage of chicken, okay, a shortage of lamb, a shortage of all this pork that people here in America love to eat, a shortage of bacon and sausage and pepperoni. All right. Yeah. So, one of the judgments that the Lord brings upon, all right, a sinful kingdom, a wicked kingdom, especially, one such as America, is that he will send famine upon that wicked kingdom, all right, as judgment, you see. And so, as this article goes into, all right, parts of America now facing fresh food shortages for the first time. Rising food insecurity hits record numbers across the country. All right, and so as it goes into, it says the latest data reveals a stark reality that many Americans are grappling with an unprecedented food crisis. It says the report reveals that 47.4 million people lived in households experiencing food insecurity last year. Right, last year, 2024. It says an increase of 3 million compared to 2022 and 13.5 million compared to 2021. So over these past few years, we've been seeing an increasing number of people across America, okay, dealing with food insecurity, not being able to buy as much food as they were, comfortably used to in times past, especially before 2020. All right. It says, this dramatic surge represents one of the most significant spikes in food insecurity in recent American history. All right. And then it continues to say, what makes this situation particularly alarming is the spread of food insecurity across previously stable communities. It says food insecurity exists in all 3,144 counties. All right. It says, again, food insecurity exists in all 3,144 counties and county equivalents, as well as all 435 congressional districts in all 50 states and the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So pretty much all across Babylon the Great America are, millions of people experiencing food insecurity. It says, the crisis has reached virtually every corner of the nation, leaving no community untouched. See that? And this is all, again, being done by Yahweh Shema Shai as judgment upon Babylon the Great, all right, this sinful kingdom whose sins have reached unto the heavens. You see? And as it continues to go into, let's see, Then now it goes into climate disasters. It's going into Hurricane Helene. Okay, which hit over there in the Carolinas last year, which left a lot of people devastated. Out there in the Carolinas, many deaths occurred due to that hurricane. Many people's homes being destroyed. Okay, being left wanting. All right, and even to this very day, you still have a lot of people out there in the Carolinas that's still haven't recovered from the impact of Hurricane Helene that touched down in the Carolinas last year. A lot of Edomites, okay, still in destitute situations, all right, as well as particular Jakes that's out there in those regions as well, all right. And meanwhile, while you still have people out there in the Carolinas that haven't recovered from Hurricane Helene, where's Trump been at to to proclaim some type of relief for those Hurricane Helene victims? All right, nowhere. All right, Trump is too busy, ushering, pretty much selling Babylon the Great America out to technocrats. Okay, passing all these executive orders to get closer to taking away people's rights and constitutional rights. All right, even looking at deporting natural-born American citizens, building all these detention centers across Babylon the Great. Okay, these people, these especially the American Edomite, and especially the American Edomite Christian, they all thought Trump was going to get in office to make America great again and help out the middle class and go against the deep state and this and the third. But yet, as of July 2025, halfway into his first term, those of us that are, clearly can see what's going on. Okay, you clearly see that Trump is doing nothing but trying to make America great. Okay, he's basically selling the country out to technocrats who want to implement AI all over the place, mass surveillance, which is all ultimately going to lead to the Charagma and the NWO system being established. Okay, he's screwing over the middle class. Okay, passing the big beautiful bill, which when you go into the details of it, it goes into certain tax breaks for the rich in this country, the millionaires and the billionaires. All right, while the middle class is going to continue catching more hell. All right, more people's benefits being taken away from them. Medicaid, Section 8, SNAP, all these things. All right, DEIs. Trump isn't trying to make this place great again. He's trying to usher this place for the NWO system. And it's only a matter of time before the average American, especially the average American Edomite, okay, snaps out of the spell of MAGA. You see, which the word MAGA, when you go into it in the either the Italian or the Latin language, the word MAGA means witch. And a lot of these MAGA hats, these Trump supporters, are still under that witchcraft of Trump and his whole political party and his administration and the whole MAGA agenda. But very soon, a lot of these people are going to snap out of that spell, and sooner or later realize that Trump is not about making this place great again. He's not about going against the deep state, okay, but instead he's a part of the deep state. All right, and a lot of these Edomites are going to rebel. All right, they're going to be in uproar. They're going to take it to the streets. Okay, sedition, as it speaks of in 2 Ezra 15. All right, and another major part that's going to ignite these people to rebel against Trump and his whole administration is this famine, as we're going into. So as it goes a little bit further down in this article, it says right here, the staggering financial cost of food insecurity. Okay, it says the economic burden of food insecurity has reached unprecedented levels, with families struggling to afford basic nutrition. And this is all done by design, all right, by the elites of Esau Edom, to further bring forth more squeeze upon people, okay, bring people basically down to their knees, and have them crying out for a solution, crying out for a new system to be set in place so that they can have their little comforts and luxuries back. All right, but ultimately, this is all being done by design by Yahweh Shemel Shah. Okay, to bring forth a great humbling upon these people. You see, as a matter of fact, let me bring this out real quick. Let's see. I believe it's in Ezekiel 16. Yep, this is Ezekiel the 16th chapter, in verse 48. It says, "As I live, saith the Lord Yahweh, Sodom thy sister hath not done, nor she nor her daughters, as thou hast done, thou and thy daughters." Okay, and we know America, Babylon the Great, pursuant to Revelation 11 verse 8, is likened to the modern day spiritual Egypt, as well as the modern day spiritual Sodom. Okay, and so it says, verse 49, "Behold, this was the iniquity of thy sister Sodom: pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness was in her and in her daughters. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and needy." Okay, so it's basically going into, the Lord basically explaining, some of the reasons why he brought, such a devastating judgment upon ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, by way of, sending down fire and brimstone from the heavens. Okay, as it went into, he said pride, fullness of bread, and abundance of idleness. All right, and basically not caring for the poor and needy. Now, when you read this in, let's see, which translation I want to read. Okay, I'll read the CSB. All right, Ezekiel 16 verse 49 in the CSB. It says, "Now this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, plenty of food, and comfortable security, but didn't support the poor and needy." See that? And don't we see that here today in America, Babylon the Great, the modern day spiritual Sodom? Okay, pride at an all-time high. So-called American pride and alphabet pride, and people boasting in themselves, worshiping themselves. Okay, the pride of life all throughout this place. People all over social media, showing off this and showing off that, showing off their money, or showing off whatever career that they work, or showing off their cars, their houses. All right, the different multiple sources of income. Okay, traveling, these all these social media influencers, and people that have all these podcasts. Okay, pride is all over Babylon the Great, the modern day spiritual Sodom, and as it also said, plenty of food. Okay, an abundance of food, and as well comfortable security. People are comfortable in this place. All right, have been dwelling, all right, carelessly in this country for so long. All right, because of what? All the little luxuries and dainties and food and resources, and just all these things that make people comfortable in this place. Okay, has made these people here in America, Babylon the Great, okay, careless. All right, indulging in a comfortable security. Being able to do all types of wickedness. All right, and sins against the Lord. All right, and not being faced with any true judgment. All right, and then it says, but didn't support the poor and needy. There's all types of homelessness all over this country. Because here it is. Whenever Florida built Alligator Alcatraz a few weeks ago, when you look throughout social media, you've had a lot of people posting different comments on social media talking about how, they were able to build Alligator Alcatraz down there in Florida within a matter of 3 or 4 days, or all right, within a matter of a week, right? But yet this country can't build different shelters for the homeless and the poor and the destitute in this country, homeless veterans. All right, and these things were some of the major reasons why the Lord had to bring judgment upon ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, too much wickedness and sodomy going on in those cities. Okay, too much food being available, too much comfort, too much luxuries and dainties and whatnot. Okay, while at the same time not giving a damn about the poor and the unfortunate, the misfortunate. All right, so that led to the Lord being pissed off and bringing, utter destruction upon that place. Okay, a destruction that the Lord, all right, when you go into ancient Sodom and Gomorrah, the Lord never destroyed any other kingdom the way that He destroyed ancient Sodom and Gomorrah. Fire and brimstone sent down from the heavens. You see, and we see these same things going on here today in America. So guess what? Fire and brimstone is getting ready to come down upon this place in the form of what? ICBM nuclear missiles, hypersonic missiles shot off from World War III. All right, as well as the fire from the chariots of Yahushua and the holy angels. Okay, so going back to this article, it says again, the economic burden of food insecurity has reached unprecedented levels, with families struggling to afford basic nutrition. It says the extra amount of money that people facing hunger said they need to have enough food reached its highest point in the last 20 years, according to Feeding America's annual MAP, the Meal Gap Study. It says people facing hunger said they need an additional $24 per week in 2022, a 9.5% increase after adjusting for increased prices, inflation, right? It says nationally, the amount needed among all 44 million people facing hunger in 2022 hit a record high of 33.1 billion, man, up nearly 43%. You see, and then it continues to go into inflation, how inflation has impacted many families and people across the country. All right, but yeah, all these things has ultimately led to, slowly but surely, more and more food shortages in famine across Babylon and Great America, as a form of judgment by the Lord. Okay, and even in Second Ezra, the 16th chapter, these things are mentioned as scourges as amendment. All right, let's get it real quick. Second Ezra 16, and I'm gonna start at verse 17. It says, woe is me, who will deliver me in those days? The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, the beginning of famine and great death, the beginning of wars, and the power shall stand in fear, the beginning of evils. What shall I do when these evils come? When these evils shall come. See that? So, hey, we're beginning to see famine, across the earth. All right, but especially here, specifically here in America, Babylon the Great, we're beginning to see famine. Which is what? The beginning of sorrows and great mournings, which is going to lead to what? The beginnings of great death, as many are going to perish due to famine and lack of resources, perplexity, right? As Yahushua spoke of in Luke 21, verse 25, perplexity, the stress of nations, all right? And a lot of that perplexity, a lot of people are going to be perplexed, all right, going to be lacking resources due to famine, which is going to lead to great death, all right? And then it says right here in verse 19, behold, famine and plague, tribulation and anguish are sent as scourges for amendment. And when you go into the word scourge or scourges, it basically means like a whipping stick or a tool for correction. And this word amendment, when you go into it as well, it basically means change. All right. So the Lord is sending all these things already in the earth, famine, plague, tribulation, and anguish. All right. As scourges for amendment, to correct these people's minds, to instill the fear of the Lord upon these people, to show these people that ultimately all these things are being done in the earth, all right, not just by the elites of Esau, Edom, the powers that be, But ultimately, these things are happening in the earth because of a higher power, Yahweh Shemel Shai. But as it says right here in verse 20, but for all these things they shall not turn from their wickedness, nor be always mindful of the scourges. So, despite all these things that the Lord is already making happen in the earth in the form of these different judgments, famine, tribulation, all right, great deaths, all right, wars and rumors of war, these people in the society, especially here in America, they're still not mindful of the scourges that's being sent from the Lord. They're still continuing on in their wickedness, their folly, their BS. All right. So ultimately, this place just got to be ultimately judged by Yahweh Shema Shai by way of fire. All right. The missiles, as well as the chariots, upon the return of Yahweh Shai. Okay. So so as it was going to, the due to food shortages, okay, a lot of as we've been seeing food shortages, a lot of people across America are also struggling with food, okay, from a financial standpoint as well, okay. And let's get Revelation the 6th chapter, okay, going into the black horse. All right, Revelation chapter 6 verse 5, as you see the subheading at the top, the third seal, famine. All right, so Revelation 6 verse 5, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, come and see. And I beheld, and lo, a black horse. And black represents what? Tribulation, okay, great mournings, great evils, a bad time. Just like when you go to a funeral, right? What color do people usually wear at a funeral? They wear black, because that represents what? A time of mourning, weeping, a time of loss, pretty much bad times, right? It says, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. All right, and this word balances, when you go into it, we know balances are symbolic of judgment, right? Even in Esau's court system, you look at Esau's court system, and what is the symbol of Esau's court system? Basically, a balance beam, all right, which balance represents, judgment, right? But then when you also go into this word balance here in Revelation 6 verse 5, it says Strong's G 2218, Strong's G 2218, zygos, and it says a yoke, all right, a yoke that is put on draught cattle, and then it says metaphorically used of any burden or bondage, as that of slavery, and then it says of troublesome laws imposed on one. You see that? And have we not been seeing Donald Trump so far as the 2025 passing all these troublesome laws and executive orders, putting more of a burden on people, DEIs, all right, these different ICE raids, putting burden on these migrants, okay, passing all these executive orders in a big beautiful bill, which is all ultimately going to hurt the average, American citizen in the middle class, okay, and it's all ultimately going to put a yoke on the average American. As what? These executive orders in the direction that Trump is moving is all going to lead to a yoke being put upon people, okay, bringing people captive to this NWO system. And we know the ultimate yoke that the powers that be want to put on people is what? The charagma, you see, and that's where it's all leading to. All right, Esau coming down with this NWO system and implementing the charagma. It says this definition again under B2. It says of troublesome laws imposed on one. Draconian laws, unrighteous decrees, as the scripture speaks about. Then it says, hence the name is so transferred to the commands of Hamashiach, as the contrast, and so on and so on and so on. All right, but yeah, this word, that word balances in Revelation 6 verse 5, it went into yoke. all right, as well as troublesome laws. See that? And you see, again, as it's going into the black horse, which black represents what? A time of trouble, mourning, evils, right? All, these evils and troublesome times is coming down the pipe, right? Jacob's trouble, all right? Civil war, civil unrest, all our anarchy, chaos is all going to lead to what? Esau coming with that balance, that yoke, you see, to establish his left-hand order out of all the chaos that he's getting ready to orchestrate in this country. Okay, bringing forth draconian measures, unrighteous decrees, taking away people's constitutional rights, all under the guise of peace and safety, right? Taking away people's rights of traveling and going from one city to another, taking away people's rights to access different buildings and different places. Okay, that's what it's coming down to. But it says, verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. See thou hurt not the oil and the wine. And the oil and the wine is symbolic of this truth. This gospel, this testimony that we, the hopeful elect, have received from Yahweh Shema Shai in these outer days. And as well, the oil and the wine is also symbolic of, the elect, us, the hopeful elect, the remnant. Okay, which have this oil, this wine, which is what? This truth. Okay, and Yahweh Shai even spoke of, all right, in the parable of the the wise and foolish virgins. The wise virgins who what? Why were the wise virgins found wise? Because they kept their oil. Okay, meaning what? They kept the truth. All right, stuck to the truth, 100% doctrine. All right, and the foolish virgins, why were they likened to foolish? Because they spent up their oil. You see, they gave up the truth. They gave up the gospel. See that? So, basically what it's talking about in verse 6, all right, is that, in the midst of all the famine and the food shortages that's getting ready to increase, going down the pipe, as we're getting ready to enter Jacob's trouble, the Lord is going to, ultimately make provision for his elect. Okay, in the midst of all the famine and the food shortages, the Lord is ultimately going to take care of his elect when these things come down the pipe. Now, although, we're going to be in the midst of the famine and food shortages, and, a lot of us are going to have to go through, periods of Jacob's trouble where we're going to have to go without food for maybe a day or two as a test of our faith, right? But ultimately, the Lord is going to make provision for his elect. And as the scripture speaks about in Isaiah, the Lord said his servants shall eat. You see, the Lord is going to take care of his servants, his elect, his remnant, okay, and make sure we have provision, Lord willing, I be of the number, to endure to the end. You see? But now, when you read this verse in the NLT, Revelation 6 verse 6, in the NLT, it says, and I heard a voice from among the 4 living beings saying, a loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay. See that? And don't waste the olive oil and wine. See that? So we're getting ready to approach a time where inflation is going to get so out of pocket, so to speak. All right, that we're getting ready to enter into hyperinflation. All right, so inflated to where, as it said, just one single loaf of bread, all right, one loaf of barley, wheat bread, okay, is going to cost a full day's pay. So just think about, all right, however much you make in one day at your job, right? Just imagine you taking the amount of money that you make in one day at your job and only being able to buy one loaf of bread, or hell, even less than that. Okay, just a half a loaf of bread, or a couple of slices of bread. Just imagine you having to spend a day's pay just to buy that little of bread and that little of food. Well, guess what? That's how bad things are getting ready to get here in America, Babylon the Great, coming down the pipe. Okay, that's how bad the food shortage and the famine and the hyperinflation is going to get. Just one full day of pay is only going to be able to afford you, all right, one loaf of bread or half a loaf of bread, all right, and that's it. No, no meat, no cheese, no lettuce, no ketchup, no tomatoes, all right, just one thing of bread, and that's it. And you got to make that bread last until the end of the week, okay, or hell, even damn near halfway through the month. And just imagine people that have families that's gonna be in situations like that. You know, that's gonna make people crash out and take it to the streets. You see, which when you look at on social media and and whatnot, people are already crashing out over the cost of food and rent and gas and all these things, all these daily expenses. So how much more are people going to be crashing out when it's going to take a full day of work just to buy half a loaf of bread? All right, it's going to cause people to take it to the streets and draw the sword against each other. All right, and spoiling each other, invading each other for lack of bread and tribulation, as it speaks of in 2nd Ezra 15 verse 19. See that? But hey, despite all of that, all this hyperinflation and famine that's coming down the pipe, the Lord says He's going to take care of the oil and the wine, which is symbolic of what? His elect. You see? Let's go back into the article. Let's read a little bit more. Let's go right here. It says fresh produce shortages hit hardest. Okay, it says the availability of fresh fruits and vegetables has become increasingly unpredictable, with several factors contributing to widespread shortages. It says in 2025, shoppers could notice a lack of fresh produce on the shelves for various reasons. First, some farms depend on migrant labor for picking and packing. It says that workforce may soon be in jeopardy. All right, and it will be in jeopardy. It says, however, following the recent U.S. presidential election, President-elect Donald Trump has vowed to enact greater restrictions on immigration and conduct mass deportations of undocumented migrants once he takes power in January. All right, and as of recently, over these past few weeks, well, and really over these past few months for that matter, since Trump took office, not only have we been, of course, seeing these different ICE raids and different migrants amongst the northern tribes being deported out of the country and taken to these different ICE detention centers and now Alligator Alcatraz, and there's even information going out throughout social media where they're even dropping these migrants, all right, out of planes into the middle of oceans and whatnot, all right, and as well, we've also been seeing as of lately, migrant farmers being deported out of the country, leaving, natural legalized American farmers, okay, with labor shortages and work shortages, and you even have talks of the different migrant farmers that's being deported being replaced with Americans, able-bodied Americans that's currently on Medicaid right now, okay, which that's all ultimately going to end up in failure. A lot of these people that's in the country that's receiving these benefits and Medicaid and all of that, these people don't want to work. Even the able-bodied ones, they don't want to work. Okay, they don't want to have to get up each morning early in the morning and work all day and work all night for just to receive crumbs and barely get by in the society. They're basically like, F it. I might as well just remain unemployed and just get the little daily essentials that I need by strictly depending on the government. The hell with a job, the hell with being a slave to a 9 to 5 and this, that, and the third. But as it's going into, one of the major reasons why we've been seeing produce shortages in the stores as of lately is because of these a lot of these farmers that produce the produce that's in our stores, okay, were migrant farmers, which have been rapidly getting deported ever since Trump took office. All right, and as the scripture speaks of in Jeremiah, Was that Jeremiah 50? Let's see, I think it's up, a little bit further up. Yeah, Jeremiah 50 in verse 16, it says, cut off the sower from Babylon, and him that handleth the sickle in the time of harvest. For fear of the oppressing sword, they shall turn every one to his people, and they shall flee every one to his own land. All right, and let's read this in the NLT. It says, Jeremiah 50 verse 16 in the NLT, it says, take from Babylon all those who plant crops, send all the harvesters away. And we've been seeing that come to pass in the form of these migrant farmers being, all right, sent away, being deported. It says, because of the sword of the enemy, like ICE, for example, right? These ICE agents. It says everyone will run away and rush back to their own lands. You see that? So the sower is being cut off from Babylon more and more each day, as we been seeing what these migrant farmers being deported out of the country, which is leading to a lot of these farmers being being short on workers, which is all leading to what? Produce shortages. Okay, your fruits and your vegetables not being available in your stores like in times past. Okay, which that's all going to lead to what? More famine. Okay, which is all leading to what? More death. You see that? More troublesome times, more evil times. You see that? And this is all being done by design by the elites of Esau Edom, because they want to establish their NWO agenda and bring people down to their knees to cause people to bow the knee and take the charagma and be in line with the NWO agenda. And as we see according to prophecy, this is all ultimately being orchestrated by Yahweh Bashim Shai as judgment upon Babylon the Great America. You see? Matter of fact, let's go back to Revelation 6 and verse 6 again, going into the black horse. Famine, hyperinflation, all right, shortage of food. It says Revelation 6 verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. All right, wheat and a loaf of bread is going to cost a day's pay, as we read in the NLT. It says, see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Okay, because the Lord's going to take care of his elect in the midst of all this famine and hyperinflation and perplexity that's getting ready to ravish all across Babylon the Great. It says, verse 7, now it's going into the 4th seal, the pale horse. It says, verse 7, and when he had opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th beast say, come and see. Verse 8, and I looked, and behold, a pale horse, which paleness represents what? Death. Okay, it says, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. Which, hell represents what? Destruction, ruin, calamity. Okay, it's not talking about a place underneath the ground where you so-called burn forever. All right, no. But it says again, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell, all right, destruction, calamity, ruin, followed with him. And it says, and power was given unto him over the 4th part of the earth. All right, and what is the 4th part of the earth? That's talking about, all right, North America. All right, and more specifically, Babylon the Great. All right, the United States of America. Okay, because the globe itself is divided into 4 parts. You have the north, the south, the east, and the west. Okay, and then you have the globe divided up into hemispheres, right? You have the eastern hemisphere, Europe, Africa, Australia, India, Russia, China, right? Those regions are all located in what's known as the eastern hemisphere of the earth, right? And then of course you have the western hemisphere of the earth, which is what? The so-called Americas, so-called North, Central, and South America, right? And then you have the northwestern hemisphere of the globe, which is what? So-called North America. All right, where Babylon the Great America dwells at. Okay, that's the fourth part of the earth that is speaking of here in Revelation 6 verse 8. It says again, the middle part of verse 8, and power was given over unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with hunger and with death and with the beast of the earth. See that? So a part of this pale horse, okay, which is going to bring forth great death, is hunger. All right, which let's look up this word hunger. All right, Strong's G3042. Well, let me just play it.
Strong's G 3042. Lemas.
Mas, and it says scarcity of harvest, famine. Okay, a scarcity of harvest, like what we was going into in that article. Scarcity of produce, your fruits, your vegetables, your crops, your herbs that you buy at the store. Okay, we're starting to see a scarcity of that. All right, as well as a scarcity of other food items that's starting to pop up in the stores, which is all leading to what? Famine. Okay, famine. So a major part of this pale horse, which represents great death, is famine. All right, as well as a sword, martial law, all right, robot dogs, robot police officers, okay, civil war, civil unrest, anarchy, all right, and as well the beasts of the earth, okay, the teeth of wild beasts being used as judgment by Yahweh Shemashai, which that's spoken of in the Apocrypha. All right, the teeth of wild beasts and newly created creatures that the Lord is going to unleash upon Babylon the Great, okay, as for judgment purposes. All right, but you notice everything that it went into about this pale horse comes right after the black horse. Okay, hyperinflation. All right, civil unrest, evil times. Okay, and we see these things all being played out. Okay, more and more as we get closer to the end. You see, the black horse leading up to the pale horse. Famine, civil unrest, hunger, the sword. All right, the beasts of the earth being used as judgment. Okay, Esau, Edom getting ready to come down, great wrath, and implement the NWO system. With AI and mass surveillance, martial law, the charagma. Okay, we're in these end times. All right, the beginning of sorrows and great death, as well as famine. You see, but as it said at the latter part of verse 6 again, despite all these things, the Lord is not going to hurt the oil and the wine, which is what? Symbolic of his elect, okay, who have this truth, this gospel, this testimony, the word of Yahweh's patience, okay, and as as it speaks of in Revelation 3 and 10, Yahweh tells us, because we, keep the word of his patience, which is this gospel, this testimony, this truth, Yahweh is going to keep us from the hour of temptation. All right, keep us from, taking that charagma and bowing the knee. He's going to keep us during the time of famine and all this hell that's getting ready to break loose throughout this society. All right, and matter of fact, let's get a couple scriptures. This is Proverbs chapter 10 verse 3. It says, "The Lord Yahweh will not suffer the soul of the righteous to famish." Okay, and who's the souls of the righteous? The elect, the remnant. All right, Lord will not be of their number. It says, "But he casteth away the substance of the wicked." So the Lord is not going to suffer the souls of his elect, okay, to perish by way of famine. Okay, he's not going to allow his elect to starve to death and be hungry to death. Okay, the Lord, again, as it speaks of in Isaiah, the Lord's servants are going to eat. Okay, the Lord's going to make sure that his elect have provision, okay, to survive Jacob's trouble, endure to the end. All right, and have the things that we need to ultimately live to see Yahweh come back. All right, and get that victory. And let's get Proverbs 33 Salakia, Psalms 33, not Proverbs. Psalms 33 and let's see. Psalms 33 and verse 18, it says, Behold, the eye of the Lord Yahweh Ba'Shem El Shai is upon them that fear him, upon them that hope in his mercy. And who is that? Us, the hopeful elect. We hope in the Lord's mercy. We're prisoners of hope. Okay? It says, verse 19, to deliver their soul from death and to keep them alive in famine. You see that? So the Lord is going to deliver the souls of his elect. All right, those that hope in his mercy, that are prisoners to his hope and Yahweh Shai. He's going to deliver their souls from death. Okay, he's going to lift up a standard for his elect, make known who are chosen. Okay, create divine intervention for his elect. And hell, he's even going to use the angels to protect the elect in these latter days. All right, such as the archangel Michael, for example, as you read of in Daniel 12 and 1. All right, the Lord is going to use the archangel Michael and the holy angels to lift up a standard for the elect in these latter days. Lord will not be of their number. And as it says in verse 19 as well, and to keep them alive in famine. You see that? So the Lord is going to keep his elect alive in famine. He's not going to hurt the oil and the wine. Because the Lord, although, again, many of us that's up the hopeful elect are going to have to go through periods of Jacob's trouble where we're going to be without, having to go a day or two, without food and without resources, okay, as a test of our faith. But then again, that's just it. It's all going to be to test our faith, because the Lord, is going to, ultimately, make sure that we have provision and make sure that his servants eat. To what? To keep us alive in a famine, and to make sure that we endure to the end. All right, to live to see Yahweh Shai when he returns. See that? I believe they also had a scripture in Isaiah 33 that goes into this as well. Let's see. Isaiah 33 and 16. I'll start at verse 15. Isaiah 33 verse 15. It says, He that walketh righteously and speaketh uprightly. All right, and who's doing that? The hopeful elect in these latter days, the remnant. Okay, it says, He that despiseth the gain of oppressions, that shaketh his hands from holding of bribes, that stoppeth his ears from hearing of blood, and shutteth his eyes from seeing evil. Verse 16, he shall dwell on high. Okay, meaning what? The elect are going to get that victory up on high. In the chariot. See that? Looking down upon the destruction of Babylon the Great, America. It says, His place of defense shall be the munitions of rocks. Bread shall be given him, his water shall be sure. You see that? Bread shall be given him, his water shall be sure. Which is speaking about what? The Lord providing provision for his elect. Keeping us alive during the famine, to make sure that we endure to the end. All right, as long as what? As it went into in verse 15. As long as we continue to walk righteously according to the Spirit, according to faith. All right, as well as speak uprightly. Meaning what? Preach the correct doctrine, the 100% truth, sound doctrine. All right, all in the names of Yahweh Ba'Shem El Shai, written in our foreheads. Right, and then matter of fact, I'll continue to verse 17. Isaiah 33 verse 17. It says, Thine eyes shall see the King in his beauty. Talking about what? Yahweh Shai coming back with the brightness of his coming. See that? Our eyes shall see the King Yahweh Shai in his beauty. They shall behold the land that is very far off. Which is what? Meaning what? Yahweh Shai is going to bring us, ultimately bring us back to the Holy Land, the land of Israel. The land that was promised to our forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. See that? But, leading up to that, Yahweh Ba'Shem El Shai is going to keep us alive in a famine. Make sure that we that we don't starve to death. Make sure that we don't suffer like the rest of these people in the world. These ungodly, wicked people of the world, including the 2/3 of our people. The Lord cares for his elect, and is going to make sure that we endure to the end. Lord will not be of that number. You see, and as a matter of fact, since we're in Isaiah 33, let's jump up to verse 6. It says, "And wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of thy times." Okay, this wisdom, this knowledge via the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is what's going to keep us comforted in these times of famine, food shortages, right? The times of the black horse, which is going to lead to the pale horse. It says, "And strength of salvation. The fear of the Lord Yahweh Bashem Shai is his treasure." See that? So it's going to be the fear and the faith of Yahweh Bashem Shai and his wisdom, okay, and understanding prophecy that's going to keep us stable in these times, you know. And the Lord's going to make sure, to have provision for us in these times and make sure that we endure to the end. All right. But meanwhile, with the rest of these wicked and ungodly people in the world, they're just going to continue to suffer. All right. Go through these scourges as a mimic. All right. And ultimately be destroyed. Okay. Many by famine, many by the sword, and ultimately many by the missiles. You see that? So, yeah. So I'm going to pretty much end it off right there. Lord willing, this video was edifying. And until next time, shalom.